you for joining in for today's session of the Sense and Sensibility lecture series. This lecture series was conceived to allow access to expert viewpoints from across the globe on holistic, non-compartmentalized, sensitive design solutions. The first SNS was inaugurated by George Ferguson, who's an architect and the former mayor of Bristol. We also have had Yasmin Larry, Rafiq Azam, Andre Correa Delago, who was a Pritzker jury member, of course, Jaisim with Professor Dengle as our past speakers. And today we have the esteemed privilege to host architect Shirish Beri for its 7th edition, alongside with architect Kiran Kalamdani, the moderator for today's session. Shirish and I go back a few years when I don't really remember. I think the first time we met would probably be for the Transparence jury at Hubli, or maybe even before that. And that's when I started looking at this man and admiring him for his, very Spartan way of life, but very high, thinking. Did spend a very interesting journey back from Lahore back to Delhi with him when we went to Lahore when he won the Arcasia Award for his work. And yes, it's a pleasure to have Shirish here. And we couldn't think of anybody better than Kiran really to moderate this session. Welcome to both of you. Ethos has always believed in mentoring and giving a platform to young minds. It's an effort to equip students to be agents of change, to lead and not just follow, but to contribute towards a building of a harmonious society. With that spirit, it is great to have Anurag Gautam with us, who's the treasurer at NASA India, and he will be moderating this session from the student segment. Welcome, Anurag. I'll hand over this to this platform now to Anurag, who will take it forward from here. Thank you, and I'm sure we're going to be mesmerized. I know a little bit of what's happened behind the scenes, and I know it's going to be a very exciting session. Over to you, Anurag.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Hello, everyone. I'm Anurag Gautam, and I welcome you all for today's talk. The session continues lecture by architect Shirish, which will be followed by a conversation and a moderate audience question and answer by architect Kalamdani and I. As a representative from NASA India, it gives me immense joy to collaborate with Ethos. NASA India, being one of the largest architecture student organizations in the world, has always strived for student empowerment through its activities. Similarly, Ethos, ASH, strives for individual excellence through design education. We are delighted to foster this collaboration that aims to empower and educate students while enabling architecture education all over the country. In the spirit of today's session on understanding the many relationships between inner and outer space, we invited architect Kiran Kalamdani to moderate today's session. He is an architect, urban designer, and conservationist who practices from Chinchwad in his firm called Kimaya with his wife and partner Anjali. Kiran is interested in education, journalism, sketching, poetry, photography, and videography. Some of his interesting works include Shanivar Vada, Vishram Bagh Vada, Tulsi Bagh, Council Hall, and architecture illumination of CSMT Mumbai. His works have been published in various national and international forums, and 2 of his projects have received the UNESCO Asia Pacific Award for Conservation. So over to you, architect Kiran.
Architect Kiran, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me now. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to connect with students of NASA, really, because I remember my first NASA, that was in 1980, when for the first time we met Charles Correa and B.V. Doshi in Mumbai. And it brings back all those memories, where we used to ask him confused questions, and they would give us some very memorable answers, which I even remember today. And Geeta, I think we have known each other for quite some time, since she is conducting the argument here in Pune and several other places. And I think she's doing a wonderful job of connecting students in non-formal forums like these, which is in itself become like a very large sort of following it has, and being able to engender the dialogue that is required between professionals and students. But the job today we have is of looking at briefly the work of architect Shirish Beri, whom I've known ever since a student. And I very clearly remember the day when he visited our college at BKPS when we were in our second year. And our professor Palshikar had introduced him as someone who goes off after every few days into his own isolation, and he designs things much like the Howard Rourke that we all knew as students from the Fountainhead. For an architect for whom the eye is an important element of life, and his own personal impressions and interpretation of his experiences are significant enough to be penned down in a book over a period of 70 years. And that is indeed quite incredible. We present to you the wanderings and ponderings that he will talk about through his talks and through his presentation. And both as an architect and as a person, his main concern about the recent happenings and the not so recent ones are of course very prominently figured in his presentation. In his formative years, where he spent about 6 years at CEPT, and he refused to take a post-graduation for an MIT at Harvard and get his master's degree from there. And instead he used that money that his father had to offer him to build a farmhouse at Gaganbauda, which is near Kolhapur. And he says that he learned much more about architecture and putting it all together in the process of making that little house of his over there. Of course, that brought him very close to nature. And later on, also, he declined the partnership with his father and brother. It's a very well-established firm from Kolhapur. Very much introspective, independent, isolated, and yet connected to the world outside, balanced between the local and the universal, with his love for yoga, meditation, photography, sketching, poetry, films, and writing. You can see him as an all-round personality, as a kind of a prima donna that we all know from the early modernist period, and some from the late modernist also. Among his productive works are largely academic institutions, there are research organizations, there are of course houses, some of them which I have personally visited and experienced is of course the SDM University at Dharwad and the Dental College at Dharwad, the research institutes on agriculture, and there is one at Pune, which is the National Science Center, where creating spaces that will help people interact, help people come together and remove the disconnect that happens because of various technologies is at the center of his concern for creation. There are also other religious buildings like the St. Xavier's Church in Kolhapur, a commercial building that I have also experienced in Hubli, the Eureka Towers, which is a commercial complex, the rural hospital at Navade near Pune, and the Center for DNA Fingerprinting, which has come up recently at Hyderabad, are briefly some of the projects. I'm sure he will throw more light on this. But as far as his exhibitions or reflections on his work and the world around him go, Urmi, which is an exhibition about the inspiration and search for wholeness, is a very notable kind of exhibition that happened. 50 years of Indian architecture and planning for Indian architect and builder was yet another publication, a kind of exhibition of his. He has spoken extensively at the Princeton University in USA, in Paris, in Estonia, Sweden, Norway, Berlin, UK, Colombo, Singapore, Malaysia, Tasmania, Canberra, and Melbourne. These are only to name a few. And some of his well-known books include Spaces Inspired by Nature, in which Yashwant Pitkar, who's now a retired professor, but a contemporary of ours from the JJ School, and the book was published in 2014, very widely read and a must for any library on contemporary architecture. The recent Wanderings and Ponderings, which has been making its round, and I'm thankful for him to present me a copy of that book, and it is indeed quite engaging. His films include The Search for Wholeness, which have the Uru, the space, and Lay, which is about his own house, which is on the outskirts of Kolhapur. Recognition has come to Shirish Beri in the form of a commendation for the Aga Khan Award, the A+D Hall of Fame, and the J&K Great Masters Award, which is given to very few Indian architects. Along with that, the Pavin Fellowship at the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Affairs in Princeton University is one of great note. The Ecotop Film Festival, in which The Unfolding White, which is a film of his, was given a prize, an honorable prize. The Vasundhara Sanman, which talks about his work on the environment, is also another notable prize that he has won. The Arcacia Gold Medal for Public Buildings and the Best Medal, Best Family Residence is yet another one of his prizes. We present to you an architect who is interested in the philosophical and metaphysical meanings attached to the spaces and their creations. Since he's interested in creating contemporary architectural space that is not normally rooted, not only rooted in space, but also in the collective consciousness of the people who inhabit it. We present to you Shirish Beri. Over to you, Shirish.
Thank you, Kiran. And I thank Ethos, ASH, children of Gita, and the wonderful work they're doing there, and NASA for arranging this event, actually, which was long overdue. Gita had requested me to be on this sometime last year during the early COVID period, but that time there was some problem with the net connectivity. Today, I'm going to talk about space. As you know, I mean, if we ask ourselves, like writers, what is the medium for a writer? A medium for a writer is language. A medium for the musician are the musical notes. The medium for a painter are the colors and the canvas or whatever surface on which he paints. So I asked my students, what is the medium for us as architects? Many reply that is the roof, the walls, the windows, this, that. But I personally feel that our medium is space. And space is a very important, is one of the very important ingredient of the 5 building blocks of this universe, the Panchamahabhutas of life. But it seems to be one of the most ignored and taken for granted one. Like we can live without space, we can live without food and water for a few days, and even without air for a few minutes. But we cannot live without space, even for a nanosecond. Just adjust this. Yeah. So that is so as one delves deeper into this concept of space, one encounters two types of spaces, which are also mentioned in our scriptures. The measurable, visible, tangible outer space, which is called the Bhutakash, and the space which we move around in, and the immeasurable, invisible, intangible inner space called Chidakash and Chitakash. The space within our mind and subconscious, in our attitudes and in our values. Both are continuously influencing each other. The punchline on the poster of this event is only half of what I want to say today. It would be then, how does architecture impact our well-being? And how does our inner space, our attitudes impact our architecture? So it works both ways. Our inner space has our immeasurable attitudes, life values, moves, and priorities, which help shape uh, the outer spaces. And the outer space has the measurable spaces, formal attributes, and characteristics, which also help in shaping our inner space. So I think we need to, I'll just share the screen. Dilip, just come here. Zoom meeting. Huh? Zoom meeting share. Share, but how? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, let's like I was trying to ask. I was going to say that what kind of an outer space are we living in today, and why is that so? Why is our outer space like this? Isn't it because our collective inner space has also become so greedy, consumeristic, and cluttered? And then this outer space makes us more greedy, more anxious, restless, and agitated. Our inner space helps in creating this outer space, and the outer space again affects our inner space. It's a continuous process. Now, on the contrary, these natural outer spaces tend to make us feel peaceful, joyous, and relaxed. Internet connection unstable, relaxed, and contented. So, if this is the integrally interconnected and interdependent scenario of our inner and outer spaces, both need to be dealt simultaneously. Thus, to bring about any positive transformation in our outer space, wouldn't it be necessary to work on some major paradigm shifts in our inner space, attitudes, and life values? Shall we quickly run through some basic shifts that I think, paradigm shifts that I think are essential to truly contribute towards an architecture as well as life of goodness? The first shift that I think of is a shift from the exploitation of nature to empathy and coexistence with nature. This is what we are creating today. We have created today. So far away from nature, exploitation, negligence, exploitation also, man-made calamities, and pseudo-green, pseudo-sustainable solutions. So here, whenever I get a project, one of the most important concerns I have is how can I bring my clients or my users closer to nature? Can my work act as a catalyst in bringing man closer to nature? This was the site for my lake house when we were just lining it out, and that's the nature beyond. And we designed the house in such a way that the nature became an integral part of my house. My living room. This is my living room. That's the view from the upper floor, the mezzanine floor studio. Then there was this National Center of Cell Sciences, which Kiran talked about in Pune. It had this beautiful hill at the back with the green. And our property, our site was ending somewhere here only. So what I did was we created a transparent wall fencing and allowed the green to visually flow into the campus in the form of this articulated amphitheater, open air theater. And on another side, there was this tree, a beautiful banyan tree, which I fell in love with. And on the other side was this beda tree at the other end. And the client actually wanted me to build somewhere else on this 12-acre site. But I told them that I would like to build here in order to establish a rapport with this tree. I sat under the tree and almost kind of took its permission to build there. And this is what happened. all the stones used here are from the soil itself. None of the stones have been brought from outside. And that's the banyan tree, which sits in such a way that from anywhere in the house it can be seen. And the beautiful thing about this is that I used to keep getting telephones from the client off and on every 3-4 months. And every time he would relate an anecdote. He would say he was a kind of a very angry kind of a person and he would get into road rage and this, that, but something happened recently. And he said, I kept quiet. And he said that it was mainly because he lived in this ambience, in this atmosphere, and this tree was his kind of had become kind of his mentor and the nature there. And it had helped him to change his inner space. This was my farmhouse, which was built after locating these big mango trees on the site. And the house was built in such a way that none of the trees were disturbed. And they became an integral part of the house like this. Now, this was my living, dining, sleeping kind of a ossuary. And that's one of the trees there. On a recent site, again on a lake side, we had this tree on the site, and the site is very small. It's just a 500 square meter plot. So I designed the house in such a way that I wanted the tree as well as the outside lake and the hills to become a part of the architectural language and the architectural vocabulary. Net unstable car. Sorry, this. So this is what happened. We have the living room, we have the dining, we have the tree, we have the hills and the lake, all living together in a symbiotic kind of way. The small residence also, which has a garden inside the house. So when the housewife is cooking, she has a view of the garden. This is my bathroom in my lake house, which also, I can bathe there in the moonlight or in the sunlight or amidst the flora. This is an urban hospital, a very urban hospital on a very tight site, where we had to use potted plants, but then natural light potted plants. This is a hospital even where the operation theater also boasts of some greenery. We have the terrace garden here and a double glass there, a double glazing there, which ensures sterility inside the operation theater. Then I think another shift which is necessary is to change our attitude of gross commercialization and celebrity towards meaningful sanctity. I was invited for this conference. It's not S-Edge, it is S. Okay. And this is, I was invited to speak there. And look at this. Shah Rukh Khan, as almost like an architect, is dishing out buildings, And inside the auditorium, when I had to sit and speak here, it was very uncomfortable with the big Shah Rukh Khan sitting there with his big hand at our back, And this is the commercialization that we are falling a prey to. Now compare this. Now these are very beautifully designed 400-year-old granaries from Spain, and they are built in such a way that no rat or no vermin attacks it. It's made from stone so that the wood doesn't rot, and it stays, and it is raised from the ground so that the moisture from the ground doesn't affect the grain. These columns have this ledge or this capital on top, which is very meaningful. It is a rat-proof ledge, so that it doesn't allow the rats to come from the ground and climb inside and eat the grain. So there was so much respect, so much concern for food or for this grain because it was considered as a gift from God. And this cross up here is a sign of gratitude to God, saying thank you and 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 the food. I mean, the air ventilation was there, but no rain came in, and the grains stayed very fresh and intact here. Now compare this to a photograph of a agricultural produce market committee go down, which I clipped just last year. This one. Look at the way we are treating it. We are treating food as a commercial commodity. It has lost its sanctity, it has lost its sacredness, it has lost its meaningfulness in our life. It's just become a commodity which can be bought, sold, and wasted. This is today's food go down. And this outer space is because our inner space has become such that it creates such outer spaces. Water, for example. Today we disrespect water in this manner. There's so much pollution, so much garbage. And what was water? How was water looked like in the age-old days? It was treated with so much sanctity, so much respect. We have to bring this back into our lives. We have to bring back this sanctity. Unless we do that, we cannot have architecture that is truly great. Then we have to shift from these glossy wrappings to inner content. Why do glossy wrappings come about? Glossy wrappings are an expression of our commercialization and our greed. These are glossy wrappings and with no concern for the inside. Can the inner content be relevant? Can it be important? Then I would also look for a shift from the crowded, non-sustainable overindulgence to soothing, sustainable restraint, from greed to need. We talk about sustainability, and now that itself has become a marketable thing. It has become so commodified and so commercial. This is the gaudy, consumerist overindulgence that I'm talking about. Can that emphasis be shifted to something more simple, as dignified maybe, or more dignified maybe, from here to here? Now, in this case, this is my living room at the lake house. The view of the lake that we saw was from here earlier. It's all built-in seating, and like when I'm sitting here and facing this side, I'm in the living room talking to all of you. And when I feel hungry, I just turn around, sit here, and have my food at this dining table. And after that, I can lie down here and have my siesta. Life can be so simple, and even our design could be an expression of that. Totally closed in living room with artificial lighting, artificial air conditioning, natural lighting. My bedroom. Our bedroom at Kolhapur, in our Kolhapur place, on our terrace during the summer, when the summer temperature during the day is almost 39, 40 degrees, we sleep here on this terrace with quilt or a blanket, because the temperature here is about 24 degrees, 22 degrees outside. With the mosquito nets, very comfortable. We can even see the moon through the net, mosquito net. Or we could have multiple use of the same space. Like this was at my beach house, where we have this as the living room. When we wanted to eat, we would pull the cushions closer to the table, and this became our dining space. And so if we had guests in our house, if we had guests that day, then all the bolsters and the table would be kept aside here, and the cushions would be joined, and this became our bedroom. And so this saves so much resources. Like instead of making 3 or 4 different kinds of rooms, the same space works for all three. Or like this passage here. I mean, it's totally lit by artificial lighting, and or compare that to a passage here with the natural creepers and flora. A hospital lobby in an air-conditioned modern city hospital. Compare this to a hospital lobby, these two hospital lobbies in two of the hospitals designed by me. There's no artificial light put on. There's full, the entire space is a huge space because this hospital is about 500,000 square feet more. And there's natural light, natural ventilation, and greenery. This is a craniofacial hospital for craniofacial surgery, which also has a similar, smaller courtyard. Now, in terms of sustainability, this project that we did in Hyderabad, we got so much natural boulders from there that no stone was imported from outside. The entire building, the roads, the compound, everything was constructed from the natural boulders that we got there. Those were broken and used for this building. Or when we're talking about sustainability, I would just like you to see some slides of my present house outside Kolhapur, where we used old bricks, old tiles. Not a single tile on the house is new. We used old windows and put them there. We used discarded tall steel pieces from different sizes, waste pieces of tall steel, and made our gate as well as our fencing. The filler slab was made from bamboos as well as PVC, waste PVC pipes. The entire steel for the house structure was brought from the scrapyard. Not only the structural steel, but also the tall steel. This was brought from scrapyard. It was straightened and used in the building. This is an old carved frame that we found at in one of the villages, which we bought from the person, and it was used here, cleaned, polished, and used. And we had to add here. We had to add here in order to increase the height. The wood used in the building here, even for the flooring, for the mezzanine floor, as well as the building, was from dilapidated, dismantled and demolished old buildings. And the quality of wood is pretty good. I'm very well seasoned. And then in the same building, we have a large rainwater harvesting tank below our living and dining space. Because the site allowed it. The site had a drop of about 4.5 meters to 5 meters. So, and that's why we could accommodate this large tank, rainwater harvesting tank. And there is a drinking water, a special tank on the upper terrace for drinking water, because that is only from the upper two terraces here, and which has a proper filter and all that. So this water we use right up to June. The connection from this rainwater tank is only to my kitchen drinking water. Then we have the solar water heating, solar tubes for water heating. We have the small, just about 160 watts of solar panels. We have a solar inverter. And our electricity bill has dropped from a few thousand to about 600 rupees per month now. And this is the house that we live in. It had this drop. This is about almost 4.5 meters from here to there. And the rainwater harvesting tank is here. The rainwater from this roof collects in this gutter and is taken into the rainwater harvesting tank via a sand filter. All the tiles that you see here for the roof, everything is old. Because here the idea is not to make the building cheap or something like less expensive. The idea was to have a minimal footprint on Mother Earth, less exploitation. That means no new tree was cut to make my house. No new tile was baked for this house. No new flooring tiles were made for this house. And the house walls have these wooden battens, which have the GI wires on them, and which act as our vertical garden. We get our vegetables from here, like beans and other gourds from the building itself. So the building itself becomes a source of food. This is the flooring. This also we used to go to the tile factory, tile yards, and ask them where they have put their stack their waste, and we would and they would show us a yard at the back with all kinds of sizes of stones, broken stones. This is Vita Gold natural stone, and whatever this size of stone is also used, as well as a big size stone like this. So this is the inside of the house. In the bathroom also, we as a beggar, like beggars have like beggars don't choose. So I was like a beggar asking for old scrap tiles, and I got about 8 different kinds of tiles which were used in this bathroom of ours. Now we're talking about simplicity, consumption, and all that. This photograph is from a middle class family in Delhi, and which is I counted about 60 cosmetic tubes and these things lying around, half used, half empty, like this. And I was wondering whether this much is necessary for a single person. So we were talking about houses, but I'm talking about some day-to-day things also, which could be simplified and reduced. Like this is the other extreme. We have this counter compared to this counter, and this counter. Can you hear me? And this counter with this small cosmetics. I mean, I don't think the user has a very bad complexion. Or we can also learn from some day-to-day very beautiful Jugaad sustainability and sustainable designs, like this design made from a crate, or like these people didn't have the third stump, but they didn't stop playing. They just played cricket and created this. Or this is a sofa created out of a old waste tub. Or this is a very beautiful example that I show every time in my slide shows, where everyone is happy. Like both are this for the same purpose. They are fertilizer manufacturing factories. Like this factory is a typical modern factory which makes urea and all that. It creates so much smoke, it creates so much pollution. Like the birds up here are also coughing. And it creates a product, a urea, which is not very good for the soil. It is good for quick results, but ultimately it degrades the soil. Now compare that to this in Sudan. They have made these hollow earthen towers, and these hollow earthen towers, these towers have inside, they have hundreds of pegs, hundreds of wooden pegs embedded in the wall, and inside is pretty cool because of the earth structure. And so all the birds and pigeons and birds from that area, they enter these towers through these holes. And it is so nice and cool and air conditioned inside that they sit on these pegs. And when they sit on these pegs, they also shit. So when they shit, that entire shit collects at the bottom of this. There's a door at the back, which the farmer opens. He opens the door, removes the bird shit, which is the manure, which is the fertilizer for his soil. And there the soil is happy. The farmer is happy. The soil is happy because it gets good fertilizer. And the birds are happy because they could get good resting place. And so it's a win-win situation. So can we create more such win-win situations when we talk about sustainability in architecture? The next shift was from a closed, isolated, exclusive environment to the open, interconnected, inclusive environment. Like we have these kind of closed, exclusive environments with a lot of security and CCTV cameras and all that. As compared to that, what I try to create in my designs are spaces which are very easily used by people. Like this is that earlier house with the banyan tree which I showed you. There's this stream which runs through the house, inside the house, and comes out. And it becomes a place for people to sit and interact. So something introduced in the design helps people to come and interact. Like here, we have inlaid the chessboard in the flooring itself. This is a residential school. So the kids just bring the pieces, sit there and start playing. Or here, under this tree, they can sit here and learn, have their music classes. This is a drug de-addiction center in Pune, where we have purposefully created these kind of open group spaces because they help in the therapy. An addict who's isolated and by himself gets depressed and he can become more addictive. Whereas an addict who can kind of interacts like this or like this, uh, there are greater chances of his being cured. This is the Ayurveda hospital that we did. At the entrance, we have the Dhanvantari here, the god of health and medicine. And every evening, the patient's relatives and patients sometimes, they sit and have the sing bhajanas. And this also helps them in an early recovery. This is an Institute of Management Development where this amphitheater that we created is used for various purposes, for lectures and for dances, as well as for yoga, meditation, and many things, annual days. This is that large hospital complex lobby where we've created places where the patients or outsiders feel at ease and they can sit around, lie around here. Another shift that I feel is necessary is from the homogenized, monotonous, non-contextual designs to a more relevant, interesting, context-specific design. Like you see that this is the typical school or college building plan, which is repeated anywhere in the country. It may be in J&K cold areas in the mountains, or it may be in the desert, or it may be in the tropical areas or wherever. Now, or similar buildings anywhere in any city, uh, uh, irrespective of the climate, irrespective of the social, cultural atmosphere. These kind of things we're seeing everywhere. Non-contextual, homogenized designs. Whereas these designs, now this is from Rajasthan, a desert, which is fully responsive to the way of life for storing food, for the decoration, for interaction with outside people, and for the climate. Similarly, this is in Kerala. See how the architecture has changed because it is contextual. This architecture, both the architecture, are contextual compared to the earlier ones, which are not. The beautiful way in which they bring in ventilation and don't allow the rain to come in Kerala or in the Mediterranean. Then we also need a shift from the alienated, fragmented settlements to harmonious, unified settlements with that sense of belonging. Why have our settlements become like this? Aren't they fragmented, isolated, alien, each one of them? Now, do they have, I mean, do they make an urban whole uh, by coming together? Do they make a community that has a certain sense of belonging? No. These are the kind of environments we are creating because our inner space is fragmented. Our inner space has become schizoid. Our inner space has become greedy. And compare that to this. There is so much sense of belonging, so much harmony, so much beauty in the way people live and interact with each other, and so much. I mean, how how it responds to that climate, the Mediterranean climate, or this, how it responds to this alpine climate. We also need a shift from the limited, constrained brief and context to a more expanded, holistic brief and context. So whenever I've taken design workshops for architecture colleges, I've always told them that they should, when I ask them to design a school, they should not immediately start taking requirements for the so many 50 square meter classrooms and this and that, and so many classrooms, so many labs, and then draw those what balloon diagrams or bubble diagrams or whatever, So instead of that, can they ask themselves, okay, what is a school? So it is for learning, it is for teaching. Then what can my architecture do? What kind of designs I should create that would help in this learning process, that would help in this teaching process? So they have to go beyond the brief. We have to go beyond the brief. Like this was a school in Panchgini where there are so many trees there, existing trees, that we built the school in an organic manner and allowed all the trees to exist. Where one tree was a beautiful tree, a ficus tree, which became the center of the learning living cluster, and where actually the site is very difficult to build on. But I kept all the trees, I retained all the contours and built. And this is where I expanded the brief. Didn't want the learning to happen only in the classrooms or in the lab, but I wanted learning to happen in these kind of informal interactions and under the tree. Now, when I visited this site, with this building after about 3-4 years and talked to the teachers there, and I asked them about their feedback. What did they feel like? What were the children like? They said the children are very happy here. They're less violent. They're more creative. And one interesting thing which they said was that they had given these small children an essay to write. They had asked these children to write an essay on my best friend. And surprisingly, more than 50% of these kids wrote an essay on this tree as their best friend. Now, see what architecture can do, what this outer space can do. This outer space has affected the inner space of these students. And now, these students, when they have had this kind of a rapport and relationship with this tree in their formative years, they will hesitate to cut a tree in the future when they grow up as adults. And this is what outer space can do to the inner space, and inner space can do outer space. Similarly, here in the Drug De-Addiction Center, I was just moving around this space alone, and then one guy came here and started talking to me. Have you designed this building? I said, yes, I have designed this building. So he told me something which I had never thought of. He said that he was an addict, and he had spent 5 weeks in that building. And he said the space there, and he said this sky which he saw here every time when he passed from here, the sky that he saw, he said this was his inspiration to get cured. I said, how? Because I never thought of that like that. But then this is like going beyond the brief. He said that this was the symbol of the outside world for him, and which kept changing colors, which kept changing, the clouds were different. And every time he watched it and he wanted to go out, get cured as early as possible, get rid of his addiction and be part of this outside world. So this is what, I mean, these outer spaces which may look very prosaic and very formal and very measurable, but they have these kind of intangible, immeasurable kind of repercussions. Now, these kind of working spaces that we create, I mean, do we have to sit in a workspace like this and work? Like when I was asked to design the computational mathematics lab for Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Pune, this is what the client had in mind. But when I said, let me see the site, when I saw the site, there were some beautiful trees on the site and all that. I said, we'll have a place like this inside, But why not have a place like this outside also? So the inside place is there where they work on the language of computers, the algorithms. And the director liked the idea so much that he said, okay, I'll give my scientists high-end laptops where they can sit out here and sometimes, relieve the monotony, sit out under the tree and work also on their laptops. And this was functioning pretty well. The workspaces that we talked about, this is been the kind of workspace that I have had. This is an old photograph with black hair. And so, and I've always worked like this. I've worked on projects which are, very, very big. But still, this is the place where the germ of the idea happens. And sometimes when I need to have my associates with me to work, sometimes we work here also. Or like in this case, this is a site in Hyderabad where the client took me to see the site. It's a government project, Laboratory for the Conservation of Endangered Species, which was a project with the Department of Science and Technology, Ministry of Science, Bioinformatics, Biotechnology, and also Central Zoo Authority. So here, what happened? I fell in love with these rocks. But unfortunately, these rocks were at the edge of our site. Our site was ending here. The property was stopping here itself. And these rocks would have gone in the setback line, in the setback spaces that we have to leave. Like this. These were the rocks, beautiful rocks, almost 10 to 12 meter tall here. And this was our site. But as an architect, I feel that we have to go beyond our scope and see if something else can happen. So we have to create the context. Like I fell in love with these rocks and I wanted the rocks to be part of the building. So I requested my clients, government clients, that let us acquire this piece of land, which was very undulating and very rough and very rocky, and give a good piece of land here, a flat piece of land to these farmers. And they respected by this thing and they did try it and they obtained this land. Thereby, what happened was that the farmers were happy because they got a better piece of land here instead of this undulating land. And I was happy because I could get this land and I could build the building in such a way that my building became a tribute, a homage, I used to say earlier, but I would now say a tribute to this million-year-old architecture, this natural heritage of site. It's a million-year-old heritage. So this is what happened. We could build a building around it with the view from all sides. And every different times of the day, different seasons, the building looks different because of the different reflections in this glass. These were the rocks. This is where I had set up my design table. I stayed there for 2 or 3 days and did the design because site was very difficult to work on. So every time I would draw a line, I would go around and see if it was feasible. The forest guards kept me company with some sandwiches and some water. And this is what happened. Now it has become very different again. I'm sorry, I'm not showing the slide here, but some trees have grown inside to share the whole place, and it will become more organic. And this is the space which we created as a gathering space like this. Another shift that I envisage is a shift from the social injustice, inequity, and violence that we see in the society every day towards a greater equity, social justice, and peace. And that would change the kind of architecture that we make also. This is the kind of architecture of social injustice that we have. At one end, we have this, at one other end, we have this. Or this is an architecture of social injustice, like when across the street we have somebody sleeping like this, and here we have 13 floors reserved only for the car parking. for the cars of these people who stay in these apartments. So this kind of architecture happens because there is an inequity in our mind, there's injustice in our mind, there's a, or whereas compared to this is a very interesting example of a housing of with some sense of equity. Moshe Safdie's habitat, or this, an old settlement. And then when there is too much equity, too much social injustice, we have violence, we have this kind of a scenario. I always wonder whether this earth that we are living in, how would it be without these demarcating boundaries between different countries, where even simple small countries like Azerbaijan and they are fighting with each other, India fighting with Pakistan, China. Suppose if the country was like, if the whole globe was like this, wouldn't it be a better place to live in? And lastly, we need a shift from the measurable, tangible, and gross to the immeasurable, intangible, and subtle. People tend to value the measurable and the tangible too much compared to the immeasurable and the intangible, which is very important for me. Like our honesty, integrity, our love, our friendship, our compassion, all that is immeasurable. It is intangible, but it is very important in life for me. This is a saying which I've picked up somewhere, but it's very beautiful. Do not educate your child to be rich. Educate her to be happy. So when she grows up, she will know the value of things and not the price. Because richness is measurable, whereas happiness is immeasurable. Price is measurable, whereas value is immeasurable. And so if our attitude, if our inner space changes and becomes attuned to this wholeness of life, to this oneness of life, and we start functioning as an inseparable, integral part of this fantastic web of life, then can we attune our immeasurable inner space as well as the measurable outer space with this wonderful, omnipresent, universal space. When we are in tune with life's unity, its fullness and its rhythm, we drown in its intrinsic goodness. Then every sound becomes music, colors become a painting, words become poetry, movement becomes dance, the formless becomes a form, mind becomes meditation, and life becomes a celebration. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Shirish. I think that was an extremely wonderful 45 minutes that you have given us a complete run through your inner space that probably will enlighten our outer space also. It has been quite interactive because we've got about 8 questions that people have thrown up from their sides. And before we go to the students' questions, I'd like to ask you a few, and in which I want to ask you whether, as students, probably they come across several isms that they are taught about in their architecture class, from modernism to the neo-vernacular to deconstructivism or brutalism or postmodernism. In your long career, how have you really related to these various ideas that have been thrown up by either architects or even academicians about the architecture that is happening to you? Has it affected you greatly, or you've been largely unaffected by it? Can you tell us your inner mind about all this?
Yes, I mean, I have tried to stay away from a particular ism, but different isms have had their different influences on me. Like I have liked the simplicity and formal expression of modernism. I have liked the integration of nature in the organic architecture. I have liked some parts of even Mies van der Rohe's, like less is more philosophy,
Minimalism. Yeah.
minimalism. So basically, if you must have noticed that the images that I ran through, I mean that we saw, are not an expression of a particular ism, but they are expression of my response to that particular site, to nature, and to my concerns in life after picking up maybe some characteristics or some principles from these different isms also.
Well said, Shirish. Would you finally look towards formation of a Shirish Beri style? Is that what you see your entire career as? Or is it something else?
I hope not. let each person evolve his own. Yes.
Great, great. Yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Uh, I'll go to one of these questions where we started with Yukta Patil, who said that how do you use the debris that is generated in the construction, because many of our sites then tend to generate a lot of debris. So what do you do with all that debris that comes out of a site?
Different ways. I mean, like some of the debris is used for filling. I mean, for creating levels, for filling the plinth and all that. Some debris, if they're like the concrete debris, can also be reused with addition of cement and some more sand and this virgin sand and this thing. So if concrete debris can be mixed with normal concrete ingredients and used as concrete also, it would not make much of a difference in the strength. And debris like brick debris can be used for waterproofing for the brick pad. Brick cobas.
Manas has a question here. What he says that after you do your basic zoning, how do you detail out the plan and derive the form?
I don't do the basic zoning to start with. I start with some very basic ideas which I talked about, like designing a school. How can my architecture help in the learning process? If I'm designing a hospital, how can my architecture help in the healing process? And that basic concern and that basic concept automatically creates zones. Zones are also created for efficient circulation patterns, efficient service patterns. So all that is important. And detailing is done depending upon the kind of materials that we are using and the kind of services that we need. Like these hospitals, we need almost 20-30 types of services in the hospital, and they have to be streamlined and coordinated and put together in such a way that the whole hospital functions efficiently. So that detailing is very important. Detailing in terms of the doors, windows, flooring is also important, where I tend to pick up a certain visual kind of a motive, or not exactly a motive, but a visual element, and which I tend to not exactly repeat, but tend to kind of repeat, I can say, for the sake of it.
It becomes a leitmotif, doesn't it? It becomes a leitmotif which actually informs the rest of the design.
Like that motif could be part of the flooring pattern, the grill pattern, the door pattern, so that also helps. That detailing helps in bringing about a sense of unity when you are moving around in that building.
Yeah, so Manas, you see that there is no formula-oriented design that Beri sir talks about. It is basically generated out of the program, the context, the materials that might be important. There might be various ways architects can really get towards design. Anurag, do you have any question to Shirish sir?
Yes, sir. So I'll start. Architecture is that was actually a very wonderful session. So like it really brought into focus of the like need of introspection and how architects can be a symbol of change in the continuous harmony of inner and outer space. So like while I was like preparing for the session, there are a few questions which struck in my mind as well. So like I have this one question. Like you talked about the sense of living by feeling the architecture, like with each sense organ. Like we can see, we can hear architecture, we can like sense architecture. So can you please elaborate on how to use or understood these senses when it comes to convincing clients of the design that we actually or you have proposed?
Convincing clients. That, I mean, it's possible. I've managed to do that. I've tried to do that, and I've been very choosy also because I don't need so much work. So I've been choosing only about if I five jobs came to me, I've chose only two where I felt that I felt that mm, we could vibe with each other, the client and me, and where we understand each other. We have some common values in life,
Yes.
and then the work becomes better. Second case, there are, as you say, there are some places, there are some corporate clients where the person keeps changing. Like even for these research institutions, the director keeps changing. So every time it's a new director, new this thing. So one has to cultivate that skill, communication skill, and
Yes,
that
sir.
convincing skill to do that also. That is also an important part of architecture. Uh, and
Like
it's
thank.
not so difficult. I mean, if you give examples, like you have to explain to them the importance of a multi-sensory experience. Architecture is not a visual experience only. That is
Yes,
very
sir.
important thing which needs to be conveyed to the clients, because clients look at architecture as elevations,
Yes,
compositions
sir.
of the building which you see it from the roadside. No, architecture is a multi-sensory experience. It involves even when I'm sitting here, the breeze that I'm getting on my body is a tactile experience that I'm having. The coffee that is being brewed there, while I'm sitting
Hmm.
here, is the olfactory experience. The green that I see outside on my terrace garden and the outside is my visual experience also. And so all these hearing also, when if there's like music going on. So when you're in a space, all these multisensory experience make your experience richer and thereby make your life richer also.
Yeah, thanks, Shirish, for that. There's
Thank you so much.
a question
Uh,
from Aniket Singh. He says, in our concepts, how do we implement the metaphysical aspects in our design phase to obtain a specific user experience?
uh, can he elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, if we can have Aniket Singh who wants to elaborate on his question. Yeah, do we have Aniket Singh? Can we unmute him and have him elaborate the question? Is it possible, Anurag? Is it possible?
yes, yes, sir. I think Vedant can tell.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Great.
sir, for. Okay, so my question was actually when we talk about concept and we come to a concept and uh, when we derive a concept, so we come up with some metaphors and some uh, heavy words or so how do we implement those things in our design and how do we uh, make something so that that word or that experience can be gained by the user.
Hmm. Uh, there, it is a very tricky thing because as you might have seen that sometimes people take it, try and interpret the concept very symbolically and very, grossly, like there's that building, that fisheries building in Hyderabad. So because it's a fisheries building, they have designed the entire fisheries building in the form of a shape fish. Have you seen that? So that is not how an interpretation of a concept should be made into an architectural language, but it should be done in a more subtle way. And whatever you do in your designs will have a immeasurable dimension to it. It will have some impact on the inner space automatically. So let's say if you have a closed space, a room which is closed, it will have, then will it go with your concept? If your concept is that you want to isolate yourself from the rest of the world, then yes. But if your concept is that you want to connect with nature, then your room has to open out. It has to open out into the greenery. It has to open out to the sky or wherever. So don't take the concept bit in a very figurative way, because that doesn't add meaning to the design, and nor is it very. You look at the fish building once and you forget about it. But what is more important is, let's say in a fisheries building, can you allow that man to move around through some fish, through aquariums or through water bodies where he can see fish, or where processes of fish, fisheries or processes of catching fish are expressed and explained? Then it is different. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes it much simpler. Shirish, thank you very much. Amrita Jaikrishna has a question, and she says, do you always have an idea of your material palette before working on the design program, or do you do it simultaneously?
No, there is no preconceived idea. There is no preconceived idea. There is, it evolves. It evolves from the site. I ask the site what kind of structure it likes to have. I ask the client, and I ask the client's values and his priorities in life, or his priorities. If it's an education institution, what are his priorities? So the form evolves out of my concerns in life, the client's priorities about his function, about from the natural setting of the site and the available materials and the topography and all that. So there are so many factors which kind of come together to uh, help me help me evolve the particular form.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. There's a question from Mohan Vaitsar, who is from your own city.
Okay.
And he talks about the life which is full of stress, and many architects who are trolled for using many curved forms and lines in their designs, right from Frank Lloyd Wright and many others. And he asks you, in your creation, you use extensively curved lines with an upcoming generation believing in speed and smart, streamlined creations. Can you elaborate your philosophy on the curve and lyrical lines? How important is it for architectural character?
I have both. Maybe Mohan has been more impressed or influenced or seen more of my curves. But almost 50% of my buildings, or more than 50%, have straight lines in plan,
Yes.
as well as in this thing. But I personally, one of the reasons for having these curves is that they blend with each other and with the environment in a more harmonious way. Even if I have a straight line, the straight line doesn't abruptly sit on the ground, but it kind of goes, the straight line also goes and kind of blends with the landscape, blends with the surrounding. So one of the reasons for having the curved line or the blending tapered lines or something like that is not to have an isolated alien structure being propped up there on the side, but instead of that, have a structure which grows from the soil, which grows from the environment and blends with the environment.
Yeah, so it's not any personal preference for any geometries or any curved lines, or it's all coming from the site or the program or some of the needs over there. Yeah, very well said, Shirish. There's a person called Prajwal who has referred to your view that you showed of Santorini, and he's asking, has the pandemic had any impact, and how does one adjust to this new situation? Does architecture have any bearing on that? That's his question.
So what about Santorini and the COVID? I didn't understand.
I mean, they have beautiful spaces, all right, but how have they been affected because of the pandemic?
Okay.
And how does one, as an architect, interpret this entire phenomenon that everybody is experiencing?
I wouldn't know about how Santorini has been affected, but I don't think they have been affected much. As if the tourists from outside were stopped, they were
Yes.
okay, I think. But if the tourists were kept, if the tourists kept coming in, there would be problems. And there's a very interesting dialogue that I heard between Rutger and Yuval Noah Harari, where they discussed that one of the reasons for epidemics and pandemics to happen is goes way back when man decided to settle and become an agrarian society and settle down in one place.
Yes.
Earlier, as a hunter-gatherer, there were no epidemics, no pandemics, because somebody may catch it, but it may go maximum to 3, 4, 5, 10 people, and then it will disappear because they were not living in that proximity with each other and this thing. So we have to maybe re-question the way we work. And today's technology is allowing us to work like that, because during the pandemic, I traveled so many times to my lake house in the wilderness because it was very safe there. And I could work very comfortably without the closeness of the, by maintaining that social distance.
Yeah, so probably there's precious little that we can do as architects, to do anything to deal with this. It is a much larger question of settlement and the connectivity between people that really is in question over here. There's another question by Atharva Palshetkar, and who says, through process on designing elements for response to more dynamic age groups, that is schools where orphanages in which elder children coexist with childlike, smaller age groups. Would you have any specific design approach, or how does one approach designing of the architectural elements there? I mean, it's a question about various age groups and how does one deal with those.
Yeah, in the school, of course, the environment that I would create for a pre-primary section pre-primary section is like KG, nursery and all that, would definitely be different from the environment created for a secondary school student. But the environment for the pre-primary would be more open, flexible, and the entire environment should be like a play space. And the children should learn in the process of playing. And, like not sit in on benches like the secondary school students and learn alphabets, but learn in a different way. And for the senior students, it is more important to also experiment and interact with each other. So whether the classroom can allow that kind of an interaction between each other, as well as taking from the classes. One of the earliest schools that I designed, I'd always noticed that the school had only one blackboard.
Okay.
And it was a blackboard. Now we call it a writing board, where the teacher had the right to write only.
Okay.
So the first school, which I did almost 45 years back, I had two walls. On both sides, there were doors and windows which were opening onto an open air class and onto another passage area with a garden here. And I created a special writing board for the students on one side, where students had the freedom to draw whatever they want. I personally felt and even feel today that even if the students drew the caricature of the teacher on that wall, that is education. That is their learning. So gave a space or gave a wall specifically for the students to express themselves. So that way, so many minor details can be worked out.
Indeed, very well said, Shirish. There's another question from Malik Arjun Gaud, who asks you, is architecture for the client or the architect? Does it satisfy the architect to the fullest as we design it for the client, or is it all about the process?
It is a teamwork. It is a teamwork, very much a teamwork. It's not for an architect. Architect should not think that he is the boss and he should, I mean, like Harvard Rock you mentioned. I mean, I don't think that's the right way to practice also. And also the client should be too assertive. I mean, there should be the right amount of give and take between each other. It's like a marriage also.
Okay.
I mean, the right amount of give and take between husband and wife in order to create the right environment in the house. There's a similar thing. To have the right kind of give and take between the client and the architect to create something which the architect is proud of, and as well as the client, like he's also proud of and he enjoys. I mean, not only being proud of it, but being enjoying it.
Yeah,
like
having
I
mutual. Please.
I tell my clients that after designing the building and while leaving, I tell them like this is I am giving you, and I go there after 2-3 years to see how they have maintained it, and I say that this is like my daughter. I've given you my daughter.
Yes.
But this design is my daughter, and I want to come and see how you have kept her. You know, I mean, how well you have treated her. So that's the kind of like our daughter. We have to one day give in marriage to somebody else. So
True,
we have to
true.
give design to somebody else, but they need to take care of it.
Yeah. Can I ask you a personal question? It is about, this whole daughter and father kind of thing that you're talking about. We work on several projects where, a project goes on for several years because of many reasons. And, over the years, the client, the person who is the client changes, especially if it's an institutional one. Yeah. And then what is the special effort that you need to make as an architect to overcome the gaps in information or whatever there might be, to build new bridges with a new person who is there as a client? Yes. Have you come across this situation?
I have come across that, even with NCCS, National Center for Cell Sciences, earlier Dr. Wag, he was the main person, and we had a different rapport with each other, and the next person who came had a very different priorities. So it does become a problem. I mean, I have faced that problem, and I've tried to convince him. In some places he was convinced, and the building benefited, but some places his priorities were different. So there the building did suffer to some extent. Yes.
Yeah. So in long drawn projects, that daughter's father-in-law can become a problem as you say.
Father-in-law changes.
Father-in-law changes. Yeah. We're facing a similar problem with our work at Vishram Bagwada in Pune. It's been going on for 17 years now, and it's almost as if there is no father-in-law. And the daughter's maybe Nanand, she's creating a problem. Anyway, it's actually a challenge, to see such kind of challenges coming up in works. There's another question from Tanya Sheikh. How to merge the cultural aspect in an urban level planning? It's a very short question.
Yes, but there's long repercussions. Like first thing one has to understand is what does she mean by culture?
Yeah.
I mean, what cultural repercussions? I don't know, because now the culture that is happening now is a very universal kind of a culture. So should it find expression there, or by culture does she mean religion or a puja room in the house, or does she mean
So she's talking about urban level planning. I mean, she's talking about a larger urban level planning.
I feel we should take it in the more metaphorical way. Like
Yes.
Culturally, we had a great rapport and a great relationship with nature. Now that is going away. So can we at urban level introduce nature with that same sanctity, with that same respect, which would also help people connect to their cultural roots? Some things like these, or like in a house, when we enter a house, there is always a sense of arrival, a sense of place when we entered. Can that be created in a house or even in a flat, in an apartment? Can we do that? It is possible in simple, small gestures, architectural gestures.
Yeah, in fact, I would respond to her question by saying that in our planning, in contemporary planning, when it comes to planning public places, for example, one tends to classify them as a garden or a playground meant for a specific kind of activities. And in this, the culturally ambiguous term of a maidan, the maidan of a village or a village green, or an ambiguous open space, multi-purpose open space, is gradually going away. The moment there is an open space in the public realm, people want to put compounds around it, they want to put walls around it, and make it very specific for certain purposes, probably which earlier wasn't there. Earlier, it could be used for many things like festive celebrations, it could be used for political meetings, it could be used for sports and various things, which is probably going away. And if we can make our authorities aware of the multi-purposeness of open spaces, maybe we are bringing them closer to culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I hope that this Tanya Sheikh's question is answered by these answers.
It can only be partially answered. She'll have to delve into it.
It's a very ambiguous question that she raised, but there is a lot of meaning in that. Yes. There's Himanshu Kene, who has two questions. How should one minimize her needs of the client also in order to go green? And second is the site that you have shown of Hyderabad. What about the glossy wrapping there? Isn't it one of the examples of glossy wrappings? Otherwise, I learned a lot of things of multi-sensible architecture. Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Two questions. First one was reducing the needs, like simplicity.
Yes, yes. In order to go green.
Simplicity can come only when we realize the fullness within us. If we considered ourselves as a part of this fullness, wholeness of life, then I don't need anything much from outside to create my identity. So then automatically it's a voluntary simplicity happens. Simplicity is not for the sake of making simplicity or making something sustainable or something like that. But simplicity is something that you approach simplicity is something which you get at when you approach the essence of life. When you understand the essence of life, which is this wholeness and fullness, then automatically and voluntarily this simplicity happens. Now, the second question regarding the glossy wrappings, the glass is reflecting, but the glass there is not a wrapping. It is basically it is a passage in which all the scientists move around, and there's a buffer space in between of the AHU rooms, the toilets, and the staircase, and then the laboratories, which are air conditioned, totally air conditioned. So air conditioned labs are on that side, and the glass is for anybody from inside the building to connect to those rocks. So those rocks are not isolated, or they are not neglected, nor are they ignored. Every time, right, even when you're sitting in the waiting space of the director, you are in contact with this million-year-old national heritage. And then something will happen in your mind when you think about this wonderful national heritage that we are losing day by day. So it's basically the glass is to pay my tribute to the not only mine, but everybody's tribute to those rocks. And this was, I mean, I was just telling them the other day that this was very much appreciated by Abdul Kalam when he came to inaugurate the building. He went around the building, and then after he's looking around, he came for the function gathering. I was sitting in the audience because I was not allowed by security to go around with him. So as soon as he came there, he didn't address the gathering also. When he rose to talk, he said, "Is the architect of this building here?" Then everybody says, "Ah, yes, he's sitting there, he's sitting there." And then he on the mic, he said, "So you have designed a very beautiful building, very nice building where the scientists would enjoy working. And please meet me after the event. I would like to talk to you." And so this, why did he say that? If I had closed that building with walls, if that passage was closed with wall, would he have said that? He said because he could connect to the rocks. He could connect to this millennia-old national heritage. And from outside also, that glass, at sunset, the whole building looks different. At night, it looks different. Every time of the day, it looks different, and every season, it looks different. And thereby, I have tried to ephemeralize the typical notion of an architectural elevation.
Yeah.
This is very important. Even the walls of the building are made from these local stones, and they are done in a ragged manner, as if to make them look like ruins.
It's like a ruin. Yes, yes, indeed, yes. In fact, what I feel is that the glass is not an opaque wrapping. It is like a transparent mediator between the rocks and the person who moves around in that corridor, so that there is a constant dialogue, a visual dialogue, a mental inner space dialogue. So I think it's a very meaningful element that Shirish Beri has put around.
It was a good question. I mean,
yes, it's a very good question, Himanshu Kene. Congratulations for that. We have here Poonam Maskarinas Verma, who's also saying hi to Shirish and you, me, both of us, and that she has great respect and regard for the work that we do. We reciprocate that regard, Poonam. Thank you very much. Yeah. And Trupti Agarwal asks you, hello, sir. With clients, we tend to face strong opposition towards green spaces in the house in the name of too much maintenance. How to convince them with all the benefits of it?
Actually, the gardens which you saw in my toilets and all that, there's hardly any maintenance required. Or even at my lake house, the outside green and this thing. I just tell my clients, you just have to look at them with some love, have some empathy, and they will do well, and they do well. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think, are we done for the day, or should we go on? Are you game for a few more questions, Shirish, or?
How about
the time?
And Vedanta and Gita?
Yeah.
I've been listening. Allowing you to enjoy your conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
we are at 6:30. Vedant, Sonam, what do you
I don't mind a few more minutes.
All right. All right.
Maybe a last couple of questions, Kiran, then?
Yeah, last couple of questions. There's one from Misbah K, who says, sir, I am a student of architecture who is doing thesis on multisensory aspects of architecture to enhance human behavior and lives. Loved your approach towards creating mindful context and respecting the natural surroundings. Can you suggest any projects or places that we can visit in person to understand the multisensory aspects of architecture?
There could be many.
Shirish, over to you.
Yes, there could be many, but if you regarding in terms of my projects, you could even visit my lake house or my house here, or you could also visit the Hyderabad Laboratory for the Conservation of Endangered Species, or the Institute of Management Development in Mysore. It depends on where you are and which would be the most suitable place for you to visit.
Yeah, so I think
if you want to see a project in process, I'm doing a complex in near Pune on the Khadakwasta Lake called it's an art and culture hub called Zapurza. So that is in the making. So if you are in Pune, you could maybe take a look at that.
yeah, there's one from Puneet to everyone. Can we create an architecture that aids social justice and peace? The old city you cited as an example must have had a palace in the city as well, while Habitat 67 had apartments costing for over $1 million today. Thus, they are hardly better than other examples of one world, one, etc. This is by Puneet to everyone.
Yes, I think it's for everyone. So all of us have to think about it, and
Yeah.
each one has to start himself or herself on that. Like when I have, like, let's say when I had to design my new house, I had an old ancestral house which was pretty big, and that I sold to my brother. And when I sold that house to my brother, I got a tidy sum of money. But by creating a new house, I didn't want to increase the inequity and injustice in the society. So the new house was a smaller house and a much cheaper house. And all the money that I got from selling that old bungalow, ancestral bungalow, I used it to create a fund. Actually, I already created a fund. I used it to enhance that fund. It is called a Humane Equity and Dignity Fund. So it has it. Most of my savings are in that, and I use that fund myself to for needy people, for needy environment, for neglected open spaces, and for such causes. So it's not a single paisa is used for my own consumption, but for such things. So if each one of us can keep some a major amount of our savings apart from this, we will hardly have any social injustice and iniquity.
Shirish, I'll end the session with one last question to you about what message would you give to the younger generation for today, which are trying to go into multiple amounts of specializations. Probably they have got too many avenues open. They are also economically much well placed than what we were at our times. So what do you think are their challenges? What is your advice to them?
Yes, the younger generation has a there's a greater potential of them being distracted with so many things. I mean, getting out of a certain focus or something. There's a greater possibility of them becoming a part of the consumeristic uh, society. So one of the things I think we all should understand, and we all should not confuse a good life with the number of goods we have. And that is one thing that is very important. Actually, if there is a satisfaction, if one is satisfied with less, one is a richer person than a rich person who is not satisfied with the riches also. And one must live a real full and rich life. By rich, I don't mean, again, don't confuse a rich life with the number of riches we have, but a real full rich life where one connects to everyone, everything, and every uh, place. Like there's a poem in my book. Actually, I forgot to show this book to the everybody. Like
Yeah,
this
we got carried away in the
new
conversation.
book,
Yes.
which I have written on wanderings and ponderings. Wanderings are my journey into the outer space with my sketches and all that. And the ponderings, like these are my sketches. And the ponderings are my inner journey into my inner space, which are expressed in the form of poems. This book is now available. So anybody who wants to purchase it, he can purchase it, he or she. Uh, so I'd forgotten about the book. Uh, And so there's a poem in that book which talks about our being sensitive to everything around us. So I'll just recite those 4 lines. The poem says that, look, and you will know that every person has something to offer. Look deep, and we'll understand that every animal has something to offer. Look deeper, and we'll see and understand, appreciate that everything has something to offer. Look beyond the depth, and we will realize that nothing has everything to offer.
Very well said. Very well said. Thank you. Yeah, you can't hear the applause, but it is all there in our mind, Shirish.
Yes, I thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Geeta, and thank you, Anurag, Vedant, Sonam. Thank you, Kiran, for moderating it.
Most welcome. It's been very enjoyable. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Anurag?
Yeah, thank you so much, Architect Series, for this enriching session. We're sure we have a lot to introspect about everything from micro to macro. Thank you, Architect Kiran, for your guidance, and also give gratitude to Geeta ma'am and whole ASH team for creating this opportunity of learning with NASA India. So, before we end up this session, we'll be displaying the trailer of Architect Series' new documentary film, Guru the Space. Actually, this film explores the multi-dimensions of our day-to-day spaces and probes into the relationship of our measurable physical space of action with our inner immeasurable space of thought. Architect Series, can you talk a bit about the film?
Yeah. Yes, I've always been fascinated by the medium of film because it is audio visual and it can transcend time as well as spaces in a very short time. So that is why I decided to create this film to sensitize the architects, students, as well as the common man towards space. And it is very important for us because we take space for granted. And which hopefully after seeing this film, one would realize how important space is in our lives. So I made this film. The link is yet to be kept open for seeing. I'll just check with my man and maybe we'll share the link with NASA and SH. This is a trailer only.
This space is the very evidence of our existence. Our food storage spaces, when food was considered sacred and as a gift from God, and when food has also become a commodity that can be bought, sold, and wasted. We had interesting, organic, unpredictable, interactive streets and spaces. They have now become so monotonously boring, repetitive, secured, and predictable. How can we create that space, within and without, which could translate into greater harmony, compassion, and joy in our lives?
That was indeed beautiful. What an immersive session. What an immersive trailer. I had the honor to watch the film, and besides being hard-hitting, it will surely inspire people to look within when crafting spaces. I also have had the privilege of reading your book and learning from your wanderings and ponderings, Shirish, and I think it's something that will stay with me for a long time, and I keep going back to it in bits and pieces, and I think that's something that will help me with my inward journey as well. We once again honor and acknowledge the brilliance of architect Shirish for being with us, for sharing, and Kiran as well for his wonderful moderation and the beautiful conversation, the way he steered it. We couldn't have asked for anyone better, like I said in the beginning. To students, teachers, learners, mentors who came on board with us for this session, we hope this evokes the architectural fraternity to reflect on their own values, to introspect, to discuss and hope, to elevate, and become a better version of ourselves. Tomorrow, we are hosting a session which is part of Roka's designer practice, where we are, helping young practices understand how to set up practice, how to, choreograph their journey as a young practice. And tomorrow's session at 11 a.m. is with architect Sandeep Shikre and architect Anuja Sawant from SSA Architects on Office and Process Management, a world apart from what we were seeing just now. They talk about the importance of efficient people and office management, scheduling, budgeting, and handling of design projects based on time-tested management techniques.
Even here, we have to have that sense of management and
Yes. That's what I was saying.
That happens on its own kind of.
Yes, so I think both in their own place, yeah. And if actually they can come together in some manner, I think it'll be a beautiful symphony, really. I'd like to thank NASA once again and Anurag for being such a great team member. Vedant, you've done a lot of work with architect Shirish, and I think you've built a bond with him in a sense. Thank you all once again. Thanks, Shirish. Thanks, Kiran.
Thank you all. Been wonderful interacting and answering those interesting questions. And thank you, Geeta, Vedant, Kiran, Sonam, Anurag, everyone, and all the viewers.
God bless, and let's have a good weekend.
Yes. Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.